Hi, and welcome to the CDFM study group. My name is Helen Thomas, and today we're going to be covering CDFM Module 2.3, Business Management Process Improvement. We will begin on page 2.3.5 of the 2013 study guide. In 2008, the National Defense Authorization Act required the Department of Defense to produce a strategic plan that discusses the direction of DoD's business operations. So on page 2.3.8, it talks about the business process reengineering, also called business process innovation. It's the fundamental way of looking at DoD specific function in relation to other commercial business processes. So we're trying to streamline the DoD processes similarly to commercial business processes. So you can see the steps on page 2.3.9 of the business process reengineering steps, which begins with create a reengineering framework, identify customers and determine needs, map the existing process, measure process performance, redesign the existing process, and implement the redesign. So you're kind of analyzing your current process, see where you can make improvements, and then you initiate that new plan, which includes the improvement processes that you change and updated. On page 2.3.10, it talks about a re-engineering team composition. So it's putting a team of individuals together to analyze your current process to then come up with recommendation for how you can improve things. Now, although not stated on the re-engineering team composition, I have had pretty much everyone who've taken the Module 2 exam says that it also includes the stages of team development. So on page 10, you can see it says the re-engineering team should include a mixture of competencies and experiences. Then it talks about how some members who don't know about the process, some members who knows a little bit, some who has extensive knowledge of the process, and different backgrounds of the team. The very last paragraph says it is best to keep the team under 10 players. So what I was talking about, the stages of team development, is something you need to add is of those 10 individuals, when you put teams together, you must consider the stages of team development. There are 4 stages, and you're going to have to write these down because they're not directly stated in the material, but they are on the test. The first stage is forming. When the group starts to form, they start to identify the obligations, the objectives, what they need to get done. They start getting used to each other, identify what their skills are, what they need to do to get a result. Storming is the point where they actually start to identify and make assumptions about other team members. You storm. You think of storming is you're trying to get to work together, and you understand that some people may not be able to multitask, or some are able to then do different things at the same time. So you have the storming phase is where you're trying to figure out what the capabilities are of each member of the team. Norming is then the stage at which now you've identified the roles and what everyone's capabilities are, and according to their capability, you've assigned certain function for each. So you resolve the issues in the norming stage, and then everyone is performing their particular, and then performing is the last stage where everyone starts to complete their portion of the team project. So forming, norming, actually, let's do it again. Correct order. Forming, storming, norming, performing. Form, storm, norm, perform are the stages of team development. On page 2.3.11, you've heard the term Lean Six Sigma, so we just kind of look at what that means. So Six Sigma is basically looking at ways to reduce inefficiencies and redundancies in our process or defects in any production process. So then the Lean Six Sigma in the second paragraph is a combination of two processes, lean manufacturing and the Six Sigma methodology. So Lean Six Sigma incorporates the best of the original. So you kind of streamline the process in identifying inefficiencies and different methods to improve your current operation. The steps are listed at the bottom of page 11, which the acronym is DMAIC, Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. And those are listed. So we're going to take it over to page 2.3.13, which is the Government Performance and Results Act. So the law of 1993 for performance planning, reporting, and budgeting for federal agencies. And it just gives you the requirements of that law. It also gives you on page 14 the Modernization Act. So I'm not going to go into details because these are pretty self-explanatory. You can read those for yourself. On page 15, it talks about a strategic plan. So according to the Gpra Modernization Act, which we just talked about on page 14 of 2010, it requires DoD agencies to prepare a strategic plan. And this plan must be reported and notified to the President and Congress of its availability. So they must be made available on the agency's website and notify the President and Congress of its availability. So strategic plan. Second paragraph on page 15. The agency's strategic plan will cover a period of not less than 4 years forward from the fiscal year. So I will pause here to ask, what is the Department of Defense strategic plan? It's not listed here, but it's prior knowledge that you should have. And the 4 years should trigger you to remember the DoD strategic plan is the quadrennial report, that 4-year strategic plan that covers even the business process improvement. Starting the first Monday in February of any year following the year in which the term of the president commences. And what also must happen by the first Monday in February? The president has to submit the budget to Congress no later than the first Monday in February. So you kind of pause and see what other events occur at this time. I'm going to flip over to page 16 and 17. 16 discusses your annual performance plan, which is basically your plan for the next year of what areas you're going to evaluate and the percentage of your annual review. Am I doing a 10% check? Am I doing 100% evaluation of my performance? And then on page 17, it talks about your annual performance report. There's some timelines here. So your annual performance report provides information on the agency's progress. So looking at your projected plan and you compare them with your actual performance, your projected performance versus your actual, your plan versus your actual. The Gpra Modernization Act requires the head of the agency not less than 150 days after the end of each fiscal year to make available on the agency public website an annual performance update. And the further on, you're going to see that 150 days equates to in February of that year. And I think it's the following page. Yeah. So page 18 talks about financial reporting requirements. So the second paragraph talks about audited financial statements. So that came out of the Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990 that required all agencies to have auditable financial statement. And if you continue to read that up to the last sentence of that paragraph, you see that the Department of Defense had not achieved that goal yet, but we were required to meet that goal as of 30 September 2017. So we just met that goal to have auditable financial statement. The third paragraph. So we talk about the performance and accountability report, or the agency's financial report, were also required by the Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990. And if you read through that, where you see it says performance and accountability report, the PAR, while permitted, the combined PAR is not required. If the agency submits a consolidated PAR, that report is to be submitted to OMB and Congress no later than 45 days after the end of the fiscal year, which is 15 November, and is also to be posted to the agency's website. So 15 November, if you're doing a performance and accountability report. The DoD alternatives to the PAR, and it's mentioned there again. So that's a repeat of what we just read. All right, what else? All right, so there are miscellaneous ways in which an installation or organization may get sources of fund, may have funding other than appropriated funds. Agriculture and grazing. So make sure you read through each one of these because they have limitation. Like recycling. On the installation, you can recycle your items and you get certain amount of funding. But even in the recycling, there's a couple of things in the second paragraph where it says, once you take care of all the bills associated with running the recycling plant, not more than 50% of your balance can be then used for other projects that deals with pollution, energy conservation. You can use those fundings, and occupational safety and health activities. Now, if the remaining balance available exceeds $2 million, the amount that makes it exceed that amount then needs to be deposited into the miscellaneous account or miscellaneous receipt of the Treasury. So the remaining balance to a military installation may be transferred to your MWR, non-appropriated MWR account. If the balance available to a military installation under this section at the end of any fiscal year is in excess of 2,000 or 2 million, the amount of that excess shall be deposited into the Treasury as miscellaneous receipt. So Congress only allows us to keep certain dollar amounts at our level. If it's not appropriated, there's some funds that you internally operate with, miscellaneous funds, but you can only keep a certain amount at your level before you have to deposit it into the Treasury miscellaneous receipts. Sale and outlease. Title 40 U.S. Code allows the retention of sales of non-BRAC real property. So sale of land that has nothing to do with your BRAC. Page 22 at the top. Let's see. Yeah. At least 50% of the proceeds deposited in the special account shall be available for these activities only at military installations where the proceeds were derived. So at that installation where the money was earned, at least 50% may be used to continue that process. Fish and wildlife. So that means if you want to go fishing at a military installation, you have to pay a fee. So it's talking about the installation may be able to keep that fee that you pay to go fishing, to go hunting on the military installation. These fees are used on the installation from which the fees are collected for protection, conservation, and management of fish and wildlife. All right, page 2.3.24 talks about performing defense business practices. So within the Department of Defense, we have adopted a couple of business processes such as the working capital fund and e-commerce, electronic commerce. We talked extensively about the working capital fund in module 2.1, but it's talking about here simply that a defense working capital fund is one other way in which funding is received by that organization. Funding is then used to buy additional items to then put on the shelves to sell to a customer. Working capital or revolving fund. Electronic commerce refers to the concept that was adopted by industries, combines either incremental process improvement or re-engineering. We want to streamline the organization. So DoD sees upon another lessons learned. So the bottom line with business management process improvement is looking at external business operations, how they work, how they manage their resources, and the DoD then try to copy or adopt some of those practices to efficiently and effectively manage the resources that it has. Public-private competition, you can read through that. Let's go to top of page 2.3.26, where 1996, Congress established that military housing privatization initiative, where the housing on the installation went to a privatized company, trying to then be able to compete and to get better housing on the installation. Page 2.3.27 talks about outsourcing versus privatization. Outsourcing means the government entity still has responsibility to get the job done, but somebody else is actually doing the day-to-day operation. Whereas privatization means now the function and the responsibility is shifted to a private organization to get that particular job done. Okay, so this concludes Module 2.3, Business Management Process Improvement, and I will see you guys next time.